The gilded cage Vanessa Sinclair stood at the window of her dressing room, watching raindrops race down the glass as her mother fastened the last pearl button on her wedding gown. The Sinclair estate sprawled below, dotted with white tents and flower arrangements that cost more than most people's annual salary. "Stop fidgeting, darling," Eleanor Sinclair said, patting her daughter's shoulder. "Harrison is a catch, heir to Pierce Industries, respected in every circle that matters. Your father and I couldn't have arranged a better match." Vanessa's reflection stared back at her, a stranger in ivory silk and family diamonds. At 26, she had imagined a different life for herself, perhaps finishing her art history doctorate, traveling to the museums she'd only seen in books. Instead, her parents' financial troubles after the recession had transformed her into a commodity, a beautiful, well-bred solution to the Sinclair debt. "I barely know him." "Mother," Vanessa whispered. Eleanor sighed. "Marriage isn't about knowing someone, dear. It's about suitable partnerships. Love is a luxury for people without family names to uphold. Harrison will provide security, status, everything a woman needs. Everything except happiness." Vanessa thought but didn't say. 3 years later, Vanessa placed fresh-cut hydrangeas in a crystal vase, arranging them precisely as Harrison preferred. Symmetrical, controlled, like everything else in their mansion on Laurel Heights. The dinner table was set for 12. Harrison's business associates and their wives would arrive at 7 sharp. "The Carmichael contract is nearly finalized," Harrison announced, entering the dining room in his tailored suit. He barely glanced at Vanessa. "Thomas will be here tonight. Make sure you mention how much you adore sailing. His wife just purchased a yacht." "Yes, Harrison," Vanessa replied automatically. He inspected the table, adjusting a fork. "Wear the blue dress I bought in Milan, and the sapphire set, not those small diamonds. The Clarks will be here too. They appreciate displays of success." Their marriage had settled into this rhythm, Harrison directing, Vanessa complying. There were no arguments, no passion, just the cold efficiency of 2 people playing assigned roles. She was the perfect hostess, the beautiful wife, another acquisition in Harrison's collection of impressive things. After checking his watch, Harrison added, "I've invited the new neighbor as well. Gabriel Ramirez made a fortune in sustainable technology. Not old money, but useful connections." Vanessa paused. "The one who bought the Edwards place? I didn't realize you'd met him. At the club yesterday, unpolished but intelligent. His company's stock has tripled this year." Harrison straightened his cuffs. "He's single. Perhaps Joanna Clark might interest him. Make sure they're seated together." The doorbell rang precisely at 7. Vanessa switched on her practiced smile, greeting each guest with the warmth Harrison lacked. The Clarks, the Carmichaels, 2 senior executives and their wives, familiar faces from countless identical evenings. Then came a man she didn't recognize. Tall, with warm brown eyes and an understated charcoal suit, he carried a bottle of wine and a genuine smile that seemed out of place among the practiced social masks around him. "Mrs. Pierce," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent she couldn't place. "Gabriel Ramirez, thank you for including me tonight." Unlike the others, he looked directly at her, not through her or at her jewelry or at what she represented. Something in his gaze made her feel momentarily visible. "Welcome to our home." "Mr. Ramirez," she replied, surprised by the slight tremor in her voice. During dinner, Vanessa performed flawlessly, asking the right questions, laughing at the right moments. But she found herself stealing glances at Gabriel, seated beside Joanna Clark as Harrison had orchestrated. Unlike the others, he ate slowly, listened intently, and spoke thoughtfully rather than to impress. When the women retreated to the sitting room while the men discussed business, Vanessa excused herself for a moment. She slipped into the garden, her private sanctuary, breathing in the night air among her carefully tended roses. "They're beautiful," came a voice behind her. Vanessa turned to find Gabriel standing at the garden entrance. "Forgive me," he said. "I stepped out for some air and saw you here." "It's fine," she replied, suddenly conscious of how rarely she spoke without calculation. "The roses are my hobby." "Not just a hobby," he observed. "They have soul. Unlike," he stopped himself. "Unlike everything else here?" Vanessa finished, surprising herself. Gabriel's eyes widened slightly, then he smiled. Not the polished social smile, but something warmer. "I should return before I'm missed." As he turned to leave, Vanessa noticed something she hadn't seen in years in this house. A moment of genuine human connection. Fleeting but real, like a single breath of oxygen after years underwater. Chance encounters. The following Wednesday, Vanessa kneeled in her garden, hands deep in soil as she transplanted seedlings. This corner of the estate was her sanctuary, the only place Harrison never ventured with his critical eye. Here, among the unfurling leaves and persistent weeds, she could temporarily forget the confines of her life. "Those look like marigolds," a voice observed from beyond the stone wall. Vanessa looked up to find Gabriel Ramirez standing on the other side, a gardening trowel in his own hand, his property backed up to hers, separated only by the decorative wall that Harrison had insisted remain when the Edwards place was sold. "French marigolds," she confirmed, brushing soil from her gardening gloves. "They keep aphids away from the roses." Gabriel smiled. "Functional beauty. The best kind." Unlike at the dinner party, he wore faded jeans and a simple linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Without the formal attire, he looked more at ease, more himself. "I didn't realize you gardened, Mr. Ramirez," Vanessa said. "Gabriel, please. And I'm learning." He gestured to several misaligned rows of vegetables. "My grandmother had the greenest thumb in Oaxaca. I'm trying to honor her memory by growing the chilies and tomatoes she loved. But I'm afraid they're suffering under my novice care." Vanessa found herself smiling. A real smile. Not the practiced one she wore at Harrison's functions. "Your rows need more space between them. The plants will compete for nutrients otherwise. Would you mind showing me?" Gabriel asked, then quickly added, "That is, if you have time." Something in his hesitation told her he understood the careful boundaries that existed in her world. She glanced back at the house. Harrison was in Philadelphia until tomorrow evening. "I have time," she said, standing and brushing the dirt from her knees. They spent the afternoon side by side, Vanessa guiding Gabriel through the basics of vegetable gardening. He listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions and sharing stories of his grandmother's cooking. For hours, Vanessa forgot who she was supposed to be, instead simply existing in the moment. "You mentioned your grandmother was from Oaxaca," Vanessa said as they took a break, sitting on stone benches in the shade. "Did you grow up there?" Gabriel nodded. "Until I was 12. My parents moved us to California for better opportunities. My father worked construction. My mother cleaned houses. They saved everything to send me to college." The unguarded way he spoke of his humble beginnings stood in stark contrast to Harrison's careful curation of his family history, always emphasizing connections to old money, while minimizing the less prestigious branches of his family tree. "And now you've made a fortune in sustainable technology," Vanessa observed, recalling Harrison's assessment. Gabriel laughed softly. "That's the simplified version they print in business magazines. The truth is messier. Years of failures before any success, sleeping on friends' couches, doubting everything." He looked at her directly. "But you don't strike me as someone impressed by fortune." "I was raised to be," Vanessa admitted. "The Sinclair family has its own mythology about wealth and status. My father could trace our bloodline to the Mayflower, but couldn't manage his investments through one economic downturn." The confession slipped out before she could filter it, and Vanessa immediately tensed, expecting judgment. Instead, Gabriel nodded thoughtfully. "Old names and new money, the eternal dance of high society," he said. "Though I've never been convinced either brings happiness." Their conversation flowed easily after that, moving from gardening to books, art, and travel. Vanessa mentioned her abandoned doctorate in art history, surprised by how the old passion resurfaced as she described her research on female Renaissance painters. "Why did you stop?" Gabriel asked. The simple question hit Vanessa like a physical blow. No one had ever asked her that. Not her parents when they arranged her marriage. Not Harrison, who viewed education as merely ornamental for women. Not even her former friends who had slowly drifted away after her wedding. "It wasn't considered necessary anymore," she said carefully. Gabriel's expression darkened momentarily. Necessary to whom? Before she could answer, her phone chimed with a text. Harrison's assistant confirming his arrival time for tomorrow. Reality crashed back around her. "I should go," Vanessa said, standing abruptly. "Harrison returns tomorrow and I need to prepare the house." If Gabriel noticed her sudden shift in demeanor, he didn't comment. Instead, he simply nodded. "Thank you for your help today. My plants may actually survive now." "You're welcome." she replied, retreating to her side of the wall. Good luck with your garden. That evening, as Vanessa directed the household staff in preparation for Harrison's return, she found herself returning to Gabriel's question. Necessary to whom? The answer that had formed in her mind but remained unspoken haunted her. Necessary to anyone but me. Over the following weeks, Vanessa found herself in the garden more frequently, and Gabriel often appeared on his side of the wall. Their conversations became a bright spot in her carefully controlled existence. They established an unspoken routine. Afternoons when Harrison was at work or traveling, always in the gardens where the household staff rarely ventured. One Thursday, Gabriel arrived with a book on female Renaissance artists. I found this at a small bookshop downtown, he explained, passing it over the wall. I thought it might interest you. The thoughtfulness of the gesture, remembering her passion when even she had tried to forget it, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Vanessa blinked them away quickly, accepting the book with trembling hands. Thank you, she said softly. We all deserve to keep our passions alive, Gabriel replied, his eyes meeting hers, even when the world suggests otherwise. In that moment, standing in the garden with soil under her fingernails and a book about forgotten female artists in her hands, Vanessa felt something long dormant begin to stir. Not just desire, but something more dangerous. Hope. Blossoming truth's autumn painted Laurel Heights in amber and crimson as September gave way to October. Vanessa sat in her private reading nook, absorbed in the book Gabriel had given her. The forgotten stories of female Renaissance artists resonated deeply. Talented women who created beauty despite the constraints of their time, many fading into obscurity as their male counterparts were celebrated. Mrs. Pierce, the housekeeper's voice interrupted her thoughts. Mr. Pierce called. He'll be bringing additional guests for dinner tonight, the Baldwins and the Winstons. He asked that you prepare accordingly. Vanessa closed the book with a sigh. Thank you, Diane. Please inform the chef we'll need settings for 8 instead of 4. After the housekeeper left, Vanessa gazed out the window toward Gabriel's property. They hadn't spoken in 5 days. Harrison had been home, demanding her presence at various functions. She missed their conversations, the way Gabriel listened as though her thoughts mattered. With reluctance, she shelved the book behind several decorative art volumes where Harrison wouldn't notice it, and went to prepare for another evening of performative hospitality. That night, as Harrison dominated the dinner conversation with talk of acquisitions and property values, Vanessa's mind wandered to her neighbor. What was Gabriel doing tonight? Was he reading in his study or working late at his company? Vanessa, Harrison's sharp tone cut through her thoughts. Patricia asked about your charity involvement this season. Patricia Baldwin, a society matron whose approval Harrison coveted, waited expectantly. Vanessa smoothly transitioned into her role. I'm considering the Children's Hospital fundraiser, she replied. Their new oncology wing needs significant support. Lovely, Patricia nodded approvingly. Though I'd recommend the Symphony Gala instead. Much better networking opportunity. The Children's Hospital attracts too many new money donors. She said the words as though describing something distasteful. The most important thing is visibility, Harrison added, squeezing Vanessa's hand in warning. The Pierce name should be associated with prestigious causes. Later, as their guest departed, Harrison loosened his tie and poured himself a scotch. The Baldwins could be valuable connections. Patricia's brother sits on the zoning commission. I thought we were discussing charities, not business opportunities, Vanessa said quietly. Harrison looked at her sharply. Everything is a business opportunity, Vanessa. That's something your family never understood, which is why they needed to marry you off to me. He sipped his drink. The Symphony Gala. Make it happen. The next morning, after Harrison left for work, Vanessa escaped to her garden. The roses were fading, their petals scattered across the ground like discarded dreams. She began clearing dead foliage, finding comfort in the rhythmic work. You look troubled, came Gabriel's voice from beyond the wall. He stood there with concern etched across his features. Vanessa managed a smile. Just garden maintenance. Gabriel studied her for a moment. I've found gardening is excellent therapy, but sometimes a walk helps more. There's a path through the woods at the end of our properties. Would you like to join me? The invitation was simple, innocent even, but Vanessa hesitated. Meeting in their respective gardens was one thing. Leaving the property together felt like crossing an invisible line. Just as friends, Gabriel added gently, reading her hesitation. Sometimes a change of scenery helps clear the mind. 20 minutes later, they walked side by side along a wooded trail, golden leaves crunching beneath their feet. The forest air felt different, freer somehow. I used to hike with my father when I was young, Vanessa shared, before status and appearances became the family religion. Gabriel nodded. My father worked construction sites 6 days a week, but Sundays were sacred, family hiking days in the California hills, no matter how tired he was. You speak of your parents with such love, Vanessa observed. They taught me what matters, Gabriel replied simply. Not what you own, but what you build. Not who you impress, but who you help. They reached a small clearing with a view of the valley below. Colorful foliage stretched for miles, a natural masterpiece no human artist could replicate. This is breathtaking, Vanessa whispered. It reminds me why I started my company, Gabriel said. To protect places like this. Tell me about your work, she requested. The real version, not the business magazine summary. Gabriel smiled. We develop renewable energy solutions for communities that can't afford traditional infrastructure. Started after I visited my grandmother in Mexico and saw how her village struggled with consistent electricity. His eyes lit up as he described solar microgrids that powered remote schools and hospitals, water purification systems that served isolated communities. That's why you moved here? For business? Vanessa asked. Gabriel hesitated. Partly. We're establishing a foundation, and this area has excellent corporate partners. But honestly, he looked away momentarily. I needed a change. I ended a long-term relationship last year. Camilla, my chief financial officer. We realized we wanted different things. The personal revelation surprised Vanessa. I'm sorry. Don't be, Gabriel said. Better to face truth than perpetuate something incomplete. He glanced at her, then quickly away. What about you? Any unfulfilled dreams besides your doctorate? The question opened something in Vanessa, a door she'd kept locked for years. Words spilled out about her passion for art restoration. Her previous volunteer work teaching art to disadvantaged children, the small gallery showing she'd once organized for emerging female artists. Harrison doesn't know about any of this, she confessed. He wouldn't see the value. But you do, Gabriel said. That's what matters. When they returned to their properties, Vanessa felt simultaneously lighter and heavier. Lighter from sharing buried parts of herself, heavier from the growing awareness of everything her life lacked. The following week, Harrison left for a business trip to Tokyo. Vanessa found herself accepting Gabriel's invitation to visit a small gallery downtown, featuring works by local female artists. Walking through the exhibits, she felt alive again, engaged with the world of creativity she'd abandoned. This reminds me of your description of Renaissance chiaroscuro techniques, Gabriel observed. Studying a contemporary portrait, you remembered that? Vanessa asked, surprised. I remember everything you tell me, he replied simply. Later, over coffee at a tiny cafe, Gabriel mentioned his foundation's upcoming community art initiative for underserved schools. We need someone with expertise to help develop the program, he said. Someone who understands both art history and education. Vanessa recognized the invitation in his words. I couldn't possibly, she said, though her heart raced at the possibility. Harrison would never approve. What about what you approve of? Gabriel asked. What about what makes you come alive? On the drive home, Vanessa's mind whirled with possibilities and fears. In Gabriel's presence, she glimpsed a different version of herself, one with purpose beyond maintaining a beautiful home and hosting perfect dinner parties. That night, she lay awake in the empty master bedroom, Gabriel's question echoing in her mind. What about what makes you come alive? For years, she'd been sleepwalking through her existence, a ghost in her own life. Now, awakening feelings threatened the careful numbness she'd cultivated. It wasn't just attraction to Gabriel, though she couldn't deny that existed. It was attraction to the life he represented, one of meaning, purpose, and genuine connection, one where she might recognize herself again. Breaking Point's November arrived with bitter winds and early darkness. Vanessa stood in the ballroom of the Westbrook Hotel, champagne flute in hand, watching Harrison charm potential investors at the Symphony Gala. Her midnight blue gown, selected by Harrison, of course, sparkled under the chandeliers, drawing appreciative glances from the city's elite. Mrs. Pierce, Patricia Baldwin, appeared at her side. Your husband mentioned you've taken an interest in the community art initiative. Such a quaint cause. Vanessa stiffened. She had mentioned Gabriel's foundation project to Harrison only yesterday, expressing interest in contributing her expertise. His dismissive laugh still stung. Art education creates critical thinkers, Mrs. Baldwin, Vanessa replied. Something our community needs more than another symphony season. Patricia's eyebrows rose at the unexpected response. Well, I see you've developed strong opinions lately. Before Vanessa could respond, Harrison materialized beside them, his smile tight. Vanessa is passionate about many worthy causes, he said smoothly. You must excuse us, Patricia. The Hendersons just arrived. His grip on Vanessa's elbow was painfully firm as he steered her across the ballroom. What was that? He hissed when they were alone. A conversation, Vanessa replied. It was embarrassing, Harrison snapped. Patricia's husband controls half the city council. We need their goodwill for the riverfront development. So my opinions should align with our business interests? Harrison's expression hardened. Your opinions should remain private when they conflict with our objectives. This isn't like you, Vanessa. First this community art nonsense, now publicly contradicting our most important allies. Perhaps you don't know what's like me anymore, Vanessa said quietly. Something dangerous flashed in Harrison's eyes. This is about Ramirez, isn't it? Don't think I haven't noticed your little garden conversations. Ice flooded Vanessa's veins. We're neighbors, Harrison. Occasionally we talk about plants. Is that why his foundation suddenly needs an art consultant? Is that why you've been reading books on Renaissance art that weren't on our shelves before? Harrison's voice remained low, his public smile intact though his eyes were cold. I'm not a fool, Vanessa. Nothing inappropriate has happened, she insisted, heart pounding. See that it doesn't, Harrison replied. Remember our prenuptial agreement. You'd leave with nothing. No money, no property, not even your grandmother's jewelry. Think carefully about whether gardening advice is worth that sacrifice. The threat hung between them as Harrison released her arm and returned to his charming persona, greeting the Henderson couple with practiced warmth. Later that night, Harrison initiated intimacy for the first time in months. Vanessa recognized it for what it was, not desire but possession, a reminder of his claim. She lay awake afterward, feeling more alone than ever in his presence. The next morning, Harrison announced he'd hired additional household staff. Diane will now accompany you whenever you're on the grounds, he stated over breakfast. For your safety, of course. The implication was clear, her movements would now be monitored. Her garden sanctuary was no longer private. For 2 weeks, Vanessa lived under this new arrangement. Diane, loyal to Harrison, who paid her salary, remained a constant shadow. The garden wall stood like a barrier to freedom, Gabriel's absence conspicuous. Had Harrison spoken to him? Warned him away? On a gray Tuesday, Vanessa sat in the breakfast room when Harrison's assistant called. Mr. Pierce asked me to inform you that the Carmichaels and Winstons will be joining you for dinner tonight. He'll be bringing them directly from the office at 7. After ending the call, Vanessa stared out the window at the November rain. Another performance. Another evening of smiling emptiness. Something within her, some final thread of endurance, snapped. Diane, she called to the housekeeper. I need to go shopping for tonight's dinner. I'll take my own car. 20 minutes later, Vanessa drove through the gates of Laurel Heights, no particular destination in mind. Freedom, even temporary, felt intoxicating. She found herself downtown, parking near the small gallery she'd visited with Gabriel. Inside, she wandered among the exhibitions, breathing more easily with each step. A familiar voice made her turn. Vanessa? Gabriel stood near a collection of student artwork, surprise evident on his face. I needed to get away, she admitted. His expression softened with understanding. Would you like to talk? There's a quiet cafe upstairs. In the nearly empty cafe, over steaming cups of tea, words poured from Vanessa. Harrison's threats, the monitoring, the isolation. Gabriel listened without interruption, his eyes darkening with concern. I'm sorry, he said when she finished. I should have been more careful. The last thing I wanted was to make your situation worse. You didn't, Vanessa insisted. You made me remember who I was before all this. That's why Harrison is threatened. What can I do? Gabriel asked. Vanessa shook her head. Nothing. This is my problem to solve. It doesn't have to be, Gabriel said gently. You don't have to face this alone. For a moment, Vanessa allowed herself to imagine leaning on someone else's strength, but the habits of self-containment were deeply ingrained. I should go, she said, checking her watch. I have to prepare for tonight's dinner. Gabriel nodded, respecting her boundaries. If you need anything at all, I'm here. No expectations, no pressure. Just support. As Vanessa drove home, his words echoed in her mind. Support without expectation felt foreign after years with Harrison, whose every gesture came with implicit demands. That evening, as the Carmichaels and Winstons laughed over dessert, Vanessa performed flawlessly. But internally, something fundamental had shifted. She watched Harrison holding court at the table's head, suddenly seeing him with painful clarity, not as the powerful man she'd feared, but as someone so insecure he needed to control everything and everyone around him. After the guests departed, Harrison poured himself a nightcap. You were distracted tonight, he observed. The Winstons noticed. Did they? Vanessa replied, her voice distant. Harrison studied her. Where did you go today? Shopping for dinner, she answered truthfully if incompletely. With a stop elsewhere, according to Diane, Harrison said. She saw the gallery receipt in your purse when she hung up your coat. The invasion of privacy should have angered Vanessa, but she felt oddly calm. You're having me followed now? Having my belongings searched? I'm protecting my interests, Harrison replied coldly. You've been different lately. Distracted, challenging. Perhaps I'm finally being myself, Vanessa said. Harrison laughed without humor. This isn't you, Vanessa. This is Ramirez's influence. I've indulged your little garden hobby, but it's becoming a problem. Gabriel has nothing to do with this, she insisted. Gabriel? Harrison's eyebrows rose at her familiar use of his name. I've been patient, Vanessa, but my patience has limits. I'm having the garden wall raised next week, and I've arranged for you to join the Baldwins at their lake house this weekend. Some distance will help you remember your priorities. As Harrison turned away, considering the matter settled, Vanessa felt something crystallize within her, not fear or anger, but clarity. For years she'd told herself she had no choice, that she was trapped by circumstances and agreements. But watching Harrison issue commands about her life with such casual authority, she suddenly recognized the fundamental truth. There were always choices, even difficult ones. She thought of Gabriel's words. You don't have to face this alone. But he was wrong about one thing. This particular battle, she did have to face alone. Not because she had no support, but because her freedom had to come from her own decision, her own strength. That night, as Harrison slept beside her, Vanessa stared at the ceiling, making plans. Not just for tomorrow or next week, but for the life she wanted to reclaim. Freedom's embrace. The grandfather clock in the foyer struck 3 a.m. as Vanessa carefully placed folded clothes into a small suitcase. Harrison's breathing remained steady from the master bedroom, unaware of her movements in the adjacent dressing room. She packed only what was truly hers, items from before their marriage, gifts from her grandmother, the few things purchased with her personal allowance. The prenuptial agreement entitled her to nothing acquired during their marriage, but Vanessa no longer cared about material possessions. What she sought now was more valuable than any Pierce fortune. She paused at her jewelry box, fingers hovering over diamond sets and sapphire pendants. All gifts from Harrison, all symbols of ownership rather than affection. She selected only her grandmother's pearl earrings and the simple gold locket containing photos of her parents from happier times. As dawn approached, Vanessa placed an envelope on Harrison's desk, containing a letter explaining her departure. Not asking permission, not apologizing, simply informing him of her decision with a dignity he had never afforded her. Beside it, she left her wedding and engagement rings. Vanessa had arranged for a car service, not to Gabriel's home as Harrison might suspect, but to her college roommate Olivia's apartment in the city. Olivia, who had maintained contact despite Harrison's efforts to isolate Vanessa from her former friends, had responded immediately to her late-night message. My door is always open. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten as Vanessa slipped through the front door, carrying only her suitcase and a leather portfolio containing her academic credentials and art portfolios. The waiting car's headlights illuminated the driveway briefly, before disappearing down the curved road toward the gates of Laurel Heights. Vanessa didn't look back. The following weeks unfolded in a blur of practical steps and emotional reckonings. Harrison, predictably, reacted with threats and ultimatums delivered through his attorneys. Vanessa, with Olivia's encouragement, secured her own legal counsel, a formidable divorce attorney who specialized in cases involving controlling spouses. The prenup is binding regarding assets, her lawyer explained, but his documented controlling behavior and the fact that you've established financial coercion gives us leverage for a settlement. Vanessa wasn't interested in Harrison's money. I just want a clean break and the freedom to rebuild my life, she told her attorney. December arrived with swirling snow and holiday decorations throughout the city. Vanessa found part-time work at a small university gallery, cataloging new acquisitions while applying to complete her doctorate. The modest salary covered her contribution to Olivia's rent and basic expenses. After years of luxury without purpose, the simple dignity of earning her own way felt profoundly satisfying. She avoided social media and declined invitations to events where she might encounter Harrison or their former social circle. Her world had contracted in some ways but expanded in others, filled now with meaningful work, genuine conversations, and the gradual rediscovery of her own voice. Of Gabriel she heard nothing. She had left without saying goodbye, believing a clean break was necessary. From Harrison, from Laurel Heights, and from the complicated feelings Gabriel stirred within her. Sometimes she found herself missing their garden conversations, but she reminded herself that true independence meant standing alone before choosing to stand with someone else. 3 days before Christmas, Vanessa worked late at the gallery, preparing for a student exhibition scheduled for January. Snow fell heavily outside the windows, coating the campus in pristine white. As she turned off the lights and prepared to leave, her phone rang. Olivia. There's someone here to see you, Olivia said, her voice tinged with excitement. Says he's been looking for you since you left Laurel Heights. Vanessa's heart stuttered. Harrison. Definitely not Harrison, Olivia laughed. This one's much easier on the eyes and brought pastries from that French bakery we love. Said something about knowing it was your favorite when you visited a downtown gallery together. Gabriel. The realization sent a wave of conflicting emotions through her. Joy, uncertainty, apprehension. Tell him, Vanessa hesitated. Tell him I'll be home in 20 minutes. The walk from the gallery to Olivia's apartment usually took 15 minutes, but Vanessa deliberately slowed her pace, needing time to collect her thoughts. By the time she arrived, snowflakes dusted her coat and hair. Olivia opened the door with a knowing smile. I'm heading to my boyfriend's place, she whispered. Take your time. She grabbed her overnight bag and slipped past Vanessa with a supportive squeeze of her arm. Gabriel stood by the window watching the snow fall. He turned when Vanessa entered, his expression a mixture of relief and uncertainty. You're a difficult woman to find, he said softly. 3 universities, 6 galleries, and countless phone calls later, here you are. Vanessa removed her coat, buying time to steady her voice. I didn't leave a forwarding address for a reason. I know, Gabriel acknowledged. And I respected that. For a while. He gestured to the pastry box on the coffee table. Almond croissants. Still your favorite? The thoughtful gesture, remembering such a small detail from their single cafe visit, nearly undid her composure. Why are you here, Gabriel? To make sure you're okay, he answered simply. To tell you how brave I think you are and, he hesitated, to give you something. From his coat pocket, he withdrew a small envelope and handed it to her. Inside, Vanessa found a formal letter, offering her a position as art education director for the Ramirez Foundation's community initiative. The salary was generous, the responsibilities aligned perfectly with her expertise. This isn't charity, Gabriel said, reading her expression. It's recognition of your qualifications. The foundation needs someone with your background. Whether or not you take it, whether or not you ever want to see me again, the offer stands on its own merits. Tears pricked at Vanessa's eyes. After years of Harrison dismissing her capabilities, having her skills professionally acknowledged felt like validation she hadn't realized she still needed. Thank you, she said quietly. I'll consider it. Gabriel nodded, maintaining a careful distance between them. That's all I ask. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I miss our conversations. The garden isn't the same without you on the other side of the wall. After he left, Vanessa sat alone in the apartment, the job offer in one hand, an almond croissant in the other. The simple kindness of being seen, truly seen for who she was rather than what she represented, sent silent tears streaming down her cheeks. 2 months later, early spring sunshine warmed the community center where the Ramirez Foundation's first student art exhibition was underway. Children proudly showed their families' artwork created through the New Education Initiative. As program director, Vanessa moved through the crowd answering questions and celebrating the young artist's accomplishments. Her divorce had finalized the previous week, Harrison eventually agreeing to a settlement when presented with evidence of his controlling behavior that would damage his reputation if made public. Vanessa had walked out of the attorney's office feeling lighter than she had in years. "This is remarkable," came a familiar voice behind her. Gabriel stood admiring a colorful mural created by elementary students. "Thank you," Vanessa replied. "The children did all the work. I just provided materials and encouragement. Sometimes that's exactly what people need to create something beautiful," Gabriel observed. "Materials and encouragement. Space to grow." They had maintained a strictly professional relationship since she'd accepted the foundation position 3 weeks after his visit. Gabriel had respected her need for independence, never pressuring or pursuing, allowing her to establish herself on her own terms. As the exhibition wound down and families departed, Vanessa and Gabriel found themselves alone in the gallery, surrounded by the joyful artwork of children who had been given the chance to express themselves freely. "Would you have dinner with me tonight?" Gabriel asked, not as my program director, not as my neighbor, just as Vanessa. She studied him in the fading afternoon light. This man who had seen her value when she'd forgotten it herself, who had waited patiently while she reclaimed her independence. "I'd like that," she replied. "As Vanessa. Just Vanessa." Outside, cherry blossoms were beginning to open on the trees lining the street, tentative at first, then with growing confidence as spring affirmed their right to bloom after the long winter. Vanessa understood their journey intimately. Some transformations required patience, courage, and the right conditions to fully unfold. As they walked together toward a small bistro around the corner, Vanessa realized she no longer carried the weight of performing someone else's idea of perfection. For the first time in years, she moved through the world authentically as herself. Not a wife, not an ornament, not a carefully crafted social asset, but a woman with her own voice, her own choices, her own path forward. Gabriel's hand brushed against hers, a question in the gesture. Vanessa intertwined her fingers with his, an answer, a beginning. She had left her gilded cage not for another's arms, but for her own freedom, and having found that freedom, having reclaimed herself, she could now choose connection from a place of strength rather than necessity. The difference made all the worth in the world. Love, Vanessa now understood, wasn't about rescue or escape. True love was about recognition, seeing and being seen, choosing and being chosen. Two whole people walking forward together rather than one completing the other. As evening settled over the city, Vanessa stepped into her future, not as someone's possession but as her own person, ready at last to write the next chapter of her story with her own hand.